Began to drive along the track to the farmhouse. She could see it ahead of her, surrounded by the spindly and wind-blown trees they had planted when they first lived there, to give the house some shelter. The track ran parallel to the road, which followed the edge of the lake. It climbed gently. At one time, all this had been back-rigged land, but she no longer farmed it herself. When Fred had died, she had handed it back to the estate. The lambs on the fell were fat and healthy, and she felt momentarily jealous of the farmer to whom the land had been leased. She missed the ritual of dipping and clipping and sending to market. Still, she thought, as she pulled up in the farmyard, she still had Lottie and Belle. She swung open the heavy door of the Land Rover and jumped down onto the yard. It was still muddy after the winter rain. She rolled up the canvas flap at the back of the vehicle and fastened it with a webbing strap, then began to lift out the plastic carrier bags. All the time she made the soft, cooing noise that let the cats know she was there. She expected them to come racing out of the barn at the side of the house, but the place was quiet, and she thought they were getting old, like her, and they were probably curled up in the kitchen next to the Aga. To get to the kitchen, she walked through the garden at the side of the house. It was overgrown and unkempt, the only colour provided by daffodils, blown almost flat by the gale of the previous week, and some spindly twigs of forsythia. In one corner there was a hen-house with a corrugated iron roof and a wire mesh run where 6 bantams scratched and pecked. The kitchen door was unlocked. She had never felt any need to keep the place fastened. She had nothing she would miss if it were stolen. The kitchen was at the back of the house, built into the hill, almost dark. She left open the door to let in more light. The room was old, shabby, not what people expected to find these days. There was linoleum, the colour of pea soup, worn through in places to the stone flags. There were the cupboards Fred had put up when they were first married. Once they had been painted white, but they were discoloured now by the smoke from the Aga and grease and cobwebs. Ursula had stopped taking people into the kitchen. Even her daughter Sally, on her rare visits, was kept firmly in the drawing-room. The visitors' looks of shock and disapproval made Ursula uneasy. Perhaps there was something shameful about the room, something she could not see, but it had always been good enough for her and Fred. Now it was good enough for her and the cats. She knew it was dirty, but thought it had never been very clean. Farmers' wives were too busy to be over-obsessed with hygiene. It occurred to her that recently she had let things slip, and she thought vaguely that she should have a good tidy out. It was the time of year for spring cleaning. The cupboard at the side of the range, for example, was full of damp and disintegrating farmers' weeklies. The scout group in Appleworth collected waste paper. Perhaps she could take it to them on her next monthly trip to the supermarket. And if she washed the windows, she might let in more light. She went back into the yard to collect the remaining bags of groceries. "Lottie!" she called. "Belle!" She was more concerned about the cats than the state of her kitchen, and there had been no sign of them by the Aga or on the scullery roof. But still they did not come, and she stamped back into the house and crouched awkwardly to stack tins in the cupboard under the sink, because that was where the mice always seemed to get, despite the cats, and only tins were safe in there. She filled a kettle at the deep enamel sink, lifted the lid on the range and put the kettle on the hot plate to boil. While she was waiting for it, she took a tin opener from the drawer in the table and began to open a large tin of cat food. She picked up the cat's earthenware bowls from the corner of the range and rinsed them onto the tap, then spooned in the food. She had chosen their favourite flavour and knew nothing would keep them away now. By the time Ursula made up her mind to go and look for the cats, the light had nearly gone. At first she tried to persuade herself that her anxiety about the animals was foolish. They were hiding, playing some sort of game with her. What harm could they come to here? One might go missing, but together they would be safe. So while she waited for the tea to brew, she put away the rest of her shopping and went to feed the hens their layers' mash. Then she poured out the tea and opened a packet of supermarket biscuits. She sat in the chair by the Aga and must have dozed off, because when she awoke with a start her tea was cold and the room was almost dark.